The real reason avoidants pull away, no one talks about this. You ever wonder why someone you care about, someone you're trying to connect with, keeps pulling away just when things start getting close? It's frustrating, right? It makes no sense on the surface, but listen, I'm here to tell you something no one else is talking about. Avoidants don't pull away because they don't care. They pull away because they care more than they know how to handle. See, most people think avoidant behavior is about a fear of commitment. That's wrong. It's not commitment they fear, it's vulnerability. Because deep down, at some level, they believe that love is dangerous. They've learned through experience, through pain, that opening up means risking loss, rejection, or even worse, losing themselves. So what do? They run. They create distance. They push away the very thing they desire most, connection. But here's the kicker. You can't force them to stay, and you can't love them into changing. Change only happens when they recognize why they're running in the first place. And if you are the one who keeps attracting avoidance, there's a reason for that too. Something in you is wired to chase. Maybe you believe that if you just prove your worth, prove your loyalty, prove your love, they'll finally stay. But the truth is, real love isn't about chasing, it's about choosing. Choosing yourself first. Choosing to stop proving and instead start recognizing your own value. So listen, if you want to break this cycle, stop focusing on the avoidant. Start focusing on you. Heal your wounds, know your worth, and watch how the game changes. Because the moment you stop chasing is the moment you start attracting something real. Most people misunderstand avoidance. They assume that when someone pulls away, it's because they don't want love, don't want commitment, or simply aren't interested enough. But that's not the truth. Avoidants don't fear commitment, they fear vulnerability. That distinction changes everything. Think about it. Commitment itself isn't the problem. They can commit to jobs, goals, routines, even friendships. But the moment emotional depth enters the picture, the moment someone gets too close, they feel the need to retreat. It's not because they don't want the relationship, it's because emotional closeness threatens something deep inside them. It threatens their sense of control, their identity, and their emotional safety. Avoidants are often people who, at some point in their lives, learned that emotional connection comes at a cost. Maybe they grew up in an environment where love was conditional, where being vulnerable meant being criticized, shamed, or rejected. Maybe they had caregivers who were inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or even intrusive. Over time, they internalized the belief that the safest way to exist in relationships is to keep a certain distance. When you believe that getting too close means getting hurt, your survival instinct tells you to avoid that risk at all costs. What's happening in an avoidant's mind when they start to withdraw? Their nervous system is reacting to emotional closeness the same way someone else might react to a physical threat. It triggers discomfort, anxiety, and the overwhelming need to create space. They might not even be consciously aware of this. It's automatic. It's the brain protecting itself based on past experiences. And because avoidants are often highly self-reliant, they don't naturally process emotions with others. Instead, they internalize, suppress, and rationalize. They tell themselves they need space, that they're losing their independence, that something just doesn't feel right. And in that moment, pulling away feels like the only way to get relief. The frustrating part, they may actually care deeply. The more they care, the more vulnerable they feel. The more vulnerable they feel, the stronger their instinct to retreat. It's counterintuitive. You think that loving someone would make them stay, but for an avoidant, love can feel overwhelming. That's why they can be warm one moment and distant the next. When they feel safe, they can be affectionate, engaged, and present. But when the relationship crosses an invisible emotional threshold, they start to feel like they're losing themselves. They may even experience what psychologists call deactivating strategies, mental tricks they use to create distance. They might start focusing on their partner's flaws, suddenly feel irritated by things they once admired, or convince themselves that they're just not ready for a relationship. These aren't conscious manipulations. They're defense mechanisms designed to maintain emotional safety. This doesn't mean avoidants are broken or incapable of love. It simply means they need to unlearn their past conditioning. But here's the thing. They won't change because someone begs them to. They won't change because someone proves their love over and over again. They'll only change when they realize that their fear of vulnerability is keeping them from the very connection they actually crave. And that realization doesn't come from pressure. It comes from self-awareness. For those who love an avoidant, the challenge is not taking their distance personally. It's easy to assume that if someone pulls away, it means you're not enough. That's not true. Their avoidance is about them, not you. That's why chasing, over-explaining, or trying to convince them to stay doesn't work. The more someone pressures an avoidant to connect, the more suffocated they feel. The only real solution is space. Not the kind that comes from silent treatment or punishment, but the kind that allows both people to reflect. For avoidants who are willing to do the work, the key is learning to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. It's recognizing that emotional closeness isn't the enemy. It's learning to communicate instead of withdrawing, to acknowledge their fears instead of letting them dictate their actions. Healing isn't about forcing themselves to be different overnight. It's about small, conscious choices that gradually rewire their beliefs about love and safety.
At the core of all of this is one truth. Avoidants don't fear commitment. They fear what commitment requires: vulnerability, trust, and emotional exposure. And until they learn that true connection doesn't mean losing themselves, but actually discovering more of who they really are, they'll keep running from the very thing they secretly want the most. Avoidants don't pull away because they don't care. They pull away because deep down they associate love with danger. This belief isn't something they consciously choose, it's something they've learned, often without realizing it. Love, for them, doesn't feel like safety. It feels like a risk, a loss of control, or even a trap. And when something feels dangerous, the natural instinct is to avoid it. To understand why avoidants behave this way, it's important to look at where these fears come from. Many avoidants have experienced emotional neglect or inconsistency in their early relationships. Maybe they had parents or caregivers who were emotionally distant, dismissive, or overwhelmed with their own problems. When they expressed emotions, they may have been ignored, criticized, or made to feel like their needs were too much. Over time, they learned that the safest way to exist in relationships was to be self-reliant, to not need too much, to not expect too much, and to keep their emotions contained. This conditioning doesn't just disappear in adulthood. When an avoidant enters a relationship, their brain automatically interprets emotional closeness through the lens of past experiences. Even if their partner is loving and supportive, their nervous system still perceives intimacy as something to be wary of. It's not logical, it's instinctive. It's their brain trying to protect them from what it believes to be a threat. This is why avoidants often feel overwhelmed in relationships. The more their partner tries to connect, the more pressure they feel. And it's not because they don't want love, it's because love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like a loss of control. When they sense that they're getting too close, their survival mechanisms kick in. They might withdraw emotionally, become distant, or focus on small irritations to justify their need for space. One of the biggest misconceptions about avoidance is that they don't have deep emotions. In reality, many of them feel emotions intensely, but they struggle to process them in a way that feels safe. Since they've learned to suppress their emotions rather than express them, they don't always recognize their own feelings in the moment. Instead of thinking, I feel vulnerable right now, they experience a general sense of discomfort. Their mind scrambles for a reason, and the easiest explanation is, this relationship isn't right, or I need more space. They convince themselves that pulling away is the logical thing to do, when in reality, it's just a defense mechanism. Another way avoidants create distance is through something called deactivating strategies. These are subconscious tactics their mind uses to reduce intimacy and regain a sense of control. They might suddenly focus on their partner's flaws. Things they didn't care about before now seem unbearable. They might tell themselves, this isn't the right person for me, or I was happier when I was alone. These thoughts aren't necessarily true, but they feel true in the moment because they serve a purpose, to justify the need to pull away. The challenge is that avoidants don't always realize they're doing this. Their reactions feel natural, as if they're simply responding to how they feel. But what they don't see is that their feelings are being shaped by past experiences, not the present reality. Their body is reacting to emotional closeness the same way it would react to a real threat, by activating the fight or flight response. For their partners, this behavior can be incredibly confusing and painful. One moment, the avoidant might seem deeply connected, and the next, they're cold and distant. This push-pull dynamic can leave the other person feeling rejected, unworthy, or like they've done something wrong. But the truth is, an avoidance withdrawal isn't about their partner, it's about their own unresolved fears. If an avoidant wants to break this cycle, they have to become aware of their patterns. They have to recognize that their fear of intimacy isn't based on their current relationship, but on their past conditioning. Instead of automatically pulling away when they feel uncomfortable, they need to pause and ask themselves, what am I actually afraid of? What story am I telling myself right now? When they slow down and examine their reactions, they can start to separate past fears from present reality. Healing from avoidant tendencies isn't about forcing themselves to be different overnight. It's about taking small steps toward connection even when it feels uncomfortable. It's about learning to express their needs instead of shutting down, to communicate instead of withdrawing. It's about realizing that love isn't something to escape from. It's something that, when approached with awareness, can actually provide the safety they've always been searching for. When an avoidant pulls away, it's easy to assume it's a reflection of something you did wrong. Maybe you weren't interesting enough, attractive enough, or loving enough. Maybe you came on too strong or didn't give them enough space. But the truth is, their behavior has nothing to do with you. Their tendency to withdraw is a defense mechanism they developed long before they ever met you. Avoidants have learned to associate emotional closeness with discomfort, and often that discomfort is rooted in experiences that go back to childhood. Many avoidants grew up in environments where expressing emotions wasn't safe. Maybe their caregivers were emotionally unavailable, dismissive, or even unpredictable. If they were ignored or criticized when they showed vulnerability, they learned that it was safer to suppress their emotions than to express them. Over time, this pattern became automatic. By the time they reach adulthood, their mind and body react to emotional intimacy the same way someone else might react to danger, with a strong urge to create distance. This is why, no matter how much you try to love an avoidant, their default response to closeness may still be withdrawal. It's not because they don't care, but because deep down, they feel safest when they're in control of their emotion. Relationships, by their very nature, require emotional interdependence, being open, vulnerable, and responsive to another person. But for an avoidant, that level of closeness can feel overwhelming, even threatening. The irony is that many avoidants actually crave connection just as much as anyone else. They want to love and be loved, but the moment things start feeling too intense, their subconscious kicks in and tells them to retreat. They might start focusing on their partner's flaws, convince themselves the relationship isn't right, or feel an overwhelming need for space. None of these reactions are truly about their partner. They're about the avoidant's own discomfort with vulnerability.
For the person on the receiving end, this behavior can be incredibly painful. It can feel like rejection, abandonment, or proof that you're not enough. And that's where so many people get stuck, believing that if they could just do something differently, the avoidant would stop pulling away. Maybe if they were more patient, more understanding, more reassuring, the avoidant would finally feel safe enough to stay. But this is a trap. No amount of love, reassurance, or effort can make an avoidant stop running if they're not ready to confront their own fears. Trying to change an avoidant by proving your worth is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you pour into it, it will never hold water until the hole is patched. The avoidant's tendency to withdraw is their hole. It's the wound they have to heal within themselves. You can't do it for them. You can't love them into security. Only they can decide to examine their patterns and take responsibility for their emotional reactions. This is why the worst thing you can do when an avoidant pulls away is to chase them. Chasing reinforces their fear that relationships will demand too much from them, making them retreat even further. The more you try to close the gap, the more suffocated they feel. Instead of making them feel safe, it confirms their belief that intimacy is overwhelming. The healthiest response when an avoidant withdraws is to respect their need for space, but also to recognize that their actions are about them, not you. It's not your job to fix them, and it's not your responsibility to prove you're worthy of love. If they are truly interested in building a secure relationship, they will have to take steps towards you, not just away from you. For those who repeatedly find themselves drawn to avoidance, there's often a pattern at play as well. Many people who chase avoidance have their own wounds, perhaps a fear of abandonment or a deep-seated belief that they have to earn love. This dynamic creates a painful cycle. The avoidant pulls away, the anxious partner chases, and both people end up reinforcing their deepest fears. The avoidant confirms their belief that closeness is overwhelming, while the chaser confirms their fear that they are unlovable unless they prove themselves. Breaking this cycle requires shifting the focus from the avoidant to yourself. Instead of asking, how can I get them to stay? The question should be, why am I trying to hold on to someone who isn't emotionally available? Instead of trying to prove your worth, the real work is recognizing that you never had to prove it in the first place. Love isn't something you earn by convincing someone to stay. It's something that should be freely given by someone who is capable of meeting you where you are. And avoidance withdrawal is not about your value, your attractiveness, or your ability to love. It's about their own fears, their own past, and their own emotional wiring. And the most empowering thing you can do is stop taking it personally. When you truly internalize that their actions are about them, not you, you free yourself from the endless cycle of trying to fix what was never yours to fix in the first place. Loving someone who pulls away can feel like an emotional roller coaster. One moment they're present, engaged, and affectionate. The next, they're distant, cold, or completely withdrawn. This push and pull dynamic can leave you feeling confused, unworthy, and desperate to figure out what went wrong. But here's the truth most people don't realize. No matter how much you love an avoidant, no matter how much you try to prove your devotion, you cannot love them into healing. They have to recognize their own patterns and take responsibility for their own emotional growth. Many people believe that if they just show enough patience, reassurance, and unconditional love, an avoidant will eventually feel safe enough to stay. This belief often comes from a deep-seated hope that love can fix anything. But when it comes to attachment wounds, love alone is not enough. Avoidants don't pull away because they don't feel love. They pull away because love to them feels risky, overwhelming, or even suffocating. Their response has nothing to do with whether you're loving them correctly. It has everything to do with their own subconscious fears and learned behaviors. Avoidants typically develop their attachment style early in life, often due to experiences with emotionally unavailable or inconsistent caregivers. If, as children, they learned that expressing emotions led to rejection, neglect, or shame, they adapted by suppressing their feelings and relying on themselves. As adults, this manifests in relationships as a deep discomfort with emotional closeness. It's not a conscious choice. It's an automatic defense mechanism. This is why no matter how much love you give, it won't change the avoidance reaction to intimacy unless they recognize and address their own patterns. Imagine someone with a deep fear of water. No amount of telling them, the water is safe, I'll be right here with you, will make their fear disappear overnight. They have to first recognize the fear, understand where it comes from, and slowly take steps to rewire their response. Avoidants are the same way. Their fear of emotional closeness won't go away just because someone loves them harder. They have to do the work themselves. One of the biggest mistakes people make in relationships with avoidants is believing that if they just hold on a little longer, the avoidant will eventually see the light and change. But what usually happens is the opposite. The more effort you put into proving your love, the more the avoidant feels pressured and suffocated. Their instinctive response is to pull away even further. They don't want to feel like they're being forced into closeness. They want to feel like they are choosing it on their own terms. This is why change only happens when the avoidant becomes aware of their own behavior and decides to break the cycle. That awareness often doesn't come until they experience the consequences of their actions, until they realize that their tendency to withdraw is preventing them from having the connection they truly crave. As long as you are trying to compensate for their fears by chasing, proving, or over-explaining, they have no reason to look inward. They will continue their pattern because it feels safe, familiar, and effective at keeping emotional discomfort at bay. For the person on the receiving end, this can be incredibly frustrating and heartbreaking. It's natural to want to help someone you love, to want to show them that they don't have to be afraid of intimacy. But the hard truth is that healing isn't something you can do for someone else. You can support them, but you can't force them to be ready for a deeper connection. If you're in a relationship with an avoidant, the best thing you can do is focus on your own emotional well-being. Instead of trying to pull them closer when they withdraw, give them the space they need. But more importantly, give yourself the space to reflect on what you truly want in a relationship. Ask yourself, are you constantly overextending yourself to make the relationship work? Are you neglecting your own needs in an effort to keep them comfortable? Do you feel like you're always the one doing the emotional heavy lifting? If the answer to these questions is yes, then it's time to shift the focus from them to you. Real love isn't about proving your worth or convincing someone to stay. It's about mutual effort, mutual emotional availability, and a willingness from both people to work through challenges together. If an avoidant is unwilling or unable to meet you halfway, then no amount of love on your part will bridge that gap. They have to do their own inner work just as you have to do yours. So the moment you stop trying to fix, chase, or prove yourself is the moment you take back your power. You are not responsible for healing someone else's wounds. You are only responsible for recognizing your own worth and deciding what kind of love you truly deserve. The biggest mistake people make when dealing with an avoidant partner is believing that if they just find the right words, the right actions, or the right level of patience, they can make the avoidant feel safe enough to stay. This belief is rooted in the idea that love alone can heal attachment wounds. That if someone just loves hard enough, consistently enough, or unconditionally enough, it will be enough to break down an avoidance wall. But this is a painful trap because the truth is an avoidant will not change simply because someone else wants them to. They will only change when they recognize that their own fear of intimacy is holding them back from the connection they actually crave. Avoidants have spent most of their lives reinforcing the belief that emotional closeness is a threat. This belief isn't something they consciously chose, it's something their nervous system learned as a way to protect them. Often this programming begins in childhood. If an avoidant grew up with caregivers who were emotionally distant, unpredictable, or dismissive of their feelings, they adapted by suppressing their emotions and learning to rely only on themselves. This self-reliance became their survival strategy, and by the time they reach adulthood, they instinctively retreat from emotional closeness without even realizing why. When an avoidant starts to feel too close to someone, their mind automatically generates reasons to pull away. They might suddenly feel irritated by things they previously found endearing. They might focus on their partner's flaws or convince themselves that they just don't feel the right level of connection. These thoughts aren't conscious attempts to sabotage the relationship. They're defense mechanisms designed to create emotional distance. The avoidant believes these thoughts are logical, but in reality, they're just familiar scripts their brain has used for years to keep them from feeling vulnerable. This is why no amount of external reassurance will change an avoidance pattern. You can tell them over and over again that you love them, that you aren't trying to control them, that they are safe with you, but if they have not recognized their own fear of intimacy, none of it will truly register. Their instinct to pull away is not based on your actions. It's based on their deep-rooted conditioning. And that conditioning will remain in place until they actively decide to challenge it. For an avoidant to change, they have to reach a point where they realize that their fear of closeness is actually keeping them from the thing they secretly want. Many avoidants do crave love, connection, and deep relationships, but their nervous system is wired to resist it. This resistance can only be broken when they begin to see their own patterns clearly, when they recognize that their avoidance is not a personality trait, but a defense mechanism. And most importantly, they have to want to change, not because someone else is asking them to, but because they themselves realize that they are stuck in a cycle that is preventing them from experiencing true emotional intimacy. The problem is that many people who love avoidance fall into the trap of trying to guide them to this realization. They try to get the avoidant to see that they are running, to help them understand why they are afraid, or to show them through unconditional love that they don't need to withdraw. But this approach almost never works because avoidants don't change due to external pressure. They change when the consequences of their avoidance, loneliness, repeated failed relationships, or a sense of emotional emptiness become undeniable. For those in relationships with avoidance, this realization is both painful and freeing. It's painful because it means accepting that no amount of effort can make someone ready for love if they aren't ready to face their own fears. But it's freeing because it takes the weight of responsibility off your shoulders. You don't have to fix them. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to walk on eggshells trying to avoid triggering their fear of intimacy. You only have to decide what kind of love you are willing to accept in your life. If an avoidant truly wants to change, they will have to do the work themselves. They will have to become aware of their own reactions, recognize when they are pulling away out of fear rather than genuine incompatibility, and start making different choices. This process isn't easy. It requires self-awareness, vulnerability, and a willingness to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. But no one can do this work for them. They have to want it. They have to choose it. This is why the best thing you can do when dealing with an avoidant is to stop trying to be the exception. Stop believing that if you love them enough, they will suddenly become emotionally available. Instead, focus on yourself. Ask yourself whether you are being fulfilled in the relationship. Ask yourself whether you are constantly trying to prove your worth. Ask yourself whether you are giving more than you are receiving. And if the answer to these questions is yes, then it may be time to step back and let the avoidant take responsibility for their own healing. Some avoidants will never change, not because they can't, but because they don't see a reason to. As long as they can continue avoiding intimacy without significant consequences, they will likely remain stuck in their patterns. Others, however, will eventually reach a point where they realize that their avoidance is no longer serving them. When that moment comes, they will either choose to do the inner work necessary to form healthier relationships, or they will continue to run, but that decision is theirs alone. The most powerful thing you can do is to stop waiting for them to change and start prioritizing your own emotional well-being. Because at the end of the day, love should not be about proving yourself to someone who is unwilling or unable to meet you where you are. It should be about mutual effort, emotional safety, and a willingness from both people to show up fully. And that kind of love can only happen when both individuals are truly ready to face themselves and each other with honesty and courage. One of the most common yet destructive beliefs people have when dealing with an avoidant avoidant is the idea that if they just show enough love, patience, and understanding, they can finally break through their partner's walls. This belief keeps people stuck in an exhausting cycle, giving more, trying harder, and bending over backward to make the relationship work, only to be met with emotional distance time and time again. But the reality is, the more you overcompensate for an avoidance emotional unavailability, the more you enable the very behavior that is hurting you. Avoidants are wired to retreat from intimacy, not because they don't want love, but because deep down, love feels like a risk, something that demands too much of them emotionally, something that could lead to pain or a loss of control. Their defense mechanism is to create distance whenever things start feeling too intense. And when they pull away, the natural instinct of someone who fears abandonment or deeply desires connection is to try to close the gap. They believe that if they can just be more patient, more reassuring, or more emotionally available, the avoidant will eventually feel safe enough to stay. But this is the paradox. The more effort you put into making an avoidant feel secure, the more their subconscious mind perceives intimacy as something overwhelming. Instead of reassuring them, your effort can make them feel even more pressured, which only triggers their instinct to withdraw further. The more you try to make them comfortable, the more they associate closeness with discomfort. This is why it's so important to recognize the dynamic at play. If you find yourself always being the one who is trying, always the one waiting for the avoidant to be ready, always the one making excuses for why they pull away, you have to ask yourself, why am I choosing this? Why am I willing to pour so much energy into someone who consistently shows me that they are not emotionally available? For many people, the answer lies in their own attachment patterns. People who are drawn to avoidance often have a deep fear of rejection or a subconscious belief that love must be earned. If, as a child, love felt conditional, if affection was only given when they were good enough, or if they had to work hard to receive validation from their caregivers, they may have learned that love is something that requires effort. That belief follows them into adulthood, leading them to chase people who are unable or unwilling to give them consistent emotional security. This is what makes the dynamic between an avoidant and someone with anxious tendencies so painful. The more an avoidant pulls away, the more the anxious person feels the need to prove their worth. And the more they try to prove their worth, the more the avoidant feels smothered and withdraws. It becomes a vicious cycle where both people are reinforcing each other's deepest fears. The avoidant confirms their belief that relationships are suffocating, while the anxious partner confirms their fear that they are not enough. Breaking this cycle requires stepping out of the role of the fixer, the healer, or the one who holds everything together. Instead of focusing on how to make the avoidant feel safe, you have to start asking how you can feel safe. Instead of worrying about what they need, you need to start prioritizing what you need. Because the truth is, healthy love is not about constantly trying to prove yourself to someone. It is not about waiting for them to wake up and realize your worth. It is about two people showing up for each other fully and willingly, without one person always being the one who has to carry the emotional weight of the relationship. This shift in mindset is powerful. When you stop trying to overcompensate for someone else's emotional limitations, you begin to reclaim your own sense of self-worth. You begin to realize that you don't have to settle for breadcrumbs of affection. You don't have to spend your time decoding mixed signals or wondering if you're too much. You are not too much. You are simply giving your love to someone who isn't equipped to receive it. The irony is, when you stop chasing an avoidant, when you stop trying to pull them closer, they often begin to take notice. Because avoidants, despite their tendency to withdraw, do not actually want to be alone. They want connection, but only on their terms. And when they see that you are no longer willing to overextend yourself to keep them, it forces them to confront their own patterns. Some may continue running. Some may finally start the inner work necessary to change. But either way, that is their journey, not yours. Your journey is about recognizing your own value and deciding what kind of love you are willing to accept. If an avoidant wants to grow, they will do so on their own. They will take responsibility for their fears and work through them, not because you convinced them to, but because they chose to. And if they are unwilling to do that work, then you have to be willing to walk away. Because the most important realization you can have is this: love should not feel like convincing. It should not feel like waiting for someone to be ready. It should not feel like constantly questioning your own worth because someone else is unable to show up fully. The right relationship will not require you to shrink, to chase, or to prove yourself. It will be mutual, effortless in the ways that matter, and safe for both people involved. When you stop overcompensating for an avoidance emotional inability, you create space for something better. You create space for the kind of love that does not feel like a battle, but like a choice. One that is made every single day by two people who are equally willing to meet each other halfway One of the hardest truths to accept when dealing with an avoidant partner is that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away. Not as a manipulation tactic, not as a way to make them miss you, but as an act of self-respect. Many people in relationships with avoidance hold on tightly, hoping that if they just love harder, wait longer, or prove their worth, the avoidant will finally see them, choose them, and open up. But the reality is you cannot force someone to be ready for love. You cannot convince someone to heal if they are unwilling to do the work. Avoidants are not inherently bad people, nor do they intentionally hurt their partners. Their tendency to withdraw, shut down, or avoid deep emotional intimacy is a learned defense mechanism, often rooted in childhood experiences where expressing emotions felt unsafe or unproductive. Over time, they develop an internal belief that relying on others leads to disappointment, and they convince themselves that true closeness is either unnecessary or overwhelming. Because of this, they may sabotage relationships, push people away when things get too serious, or struggle to provide emotional reassurance even when they care deeply. For those who love an avoidant, this can be incredibly painful. You may see glimpses of their true emotions, moments where they are warm, affectionate, and present. These moments can be intoxicating, making you believe that if you just hold on a little longer, if you just find the right way to approach them, they will stay that way permanently. But the reality is, an avoidant's emotional availability often fluctuates. When they feel safe, they may let their guard down temporarily, but as soon as emotional closeness starts to feel overwhelming, their walls go back up. This cycle can leave you feeling confused, drained, and constantly questioning what you did wrong. This is why walking away is often the only way to break the pattern. Staying in a relationship with an avoidant who is unwilling to acknowledge their emotional defenses can lead to a slow erosion of your self-esteem. Over time, you may start believing that you are the problem, that if you were just less needy, less emotional, or more chill, they wouldn't feel the need to pull away, but this is not true. The issue is not that you need too much. It's that you are asking for a level of emotional intimacy that they are not ready to give. And when you repeatedly stay in a situation where your needs are unmet, you teach yourself to settle for less than you deserve. Walking away does not mean you don't love them. It does not mean you are giving up too easily. It means you are recognizing that love is not meant to be a one-sided effort. It means you understand that you cannot be the only one carrying the emotional weight of the relationship. True connection requires mutual effort, mutual emotional presence, and a willingness from both partners to meet each other halfway. Some avoidants, when faced with the reality of losing someone they care about, may finally decide to confront their fears and do the inner work necessary to change. They may realize that their avoidance is not actually protecting them. It is keeping them from experiencing the depth of love and connection they secretly crave. But this realization cannot be forced. It must come from within them, and it often only happens when they experience the consequences of their actions. If they never have to face those consequences, if you continue staying chasing and making excuses for them, they have no reason to change. This is why walking away is not just about protecting yourself. It is also about allowing them the space to confront their own patterns. If they truly care about you and want to grow, they will recognize that they need to make changes in order to have a healthy, fulfilling relationship. But if they are unwilling to do so, then you must accept that their avoidance is not something you can fix. Choosing to walk away is not easy, especially when you love someone deeply. It requires strength, self-respect, and a willingness to tolerate discomfort. But what you gain in return is invaluable. Clarity, emotional freedom, and the ability to open yourself up to a relationship where love is not something you have to fight for. Because real love, the kind that is safe, secure, and fulfilling, is not something you should have to chase. It is something that is given freely, consistently, and willingly by someone who is just as committed to you as you are to them. At the core of every human being is the need for love, connection, and belonging. Yet, for many avoidants, this need is in direct conflict with their deepest fears. They crave love, but they fear losing themselves in it. They want closeness, but they feel suffocated by it. And until they are willing to face this internal struggle, they will continue to run, not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to stay. But here's the truth. A relationship cannot thrive if one person is always chasing while the other is always retreating. Love is not meant to be a game of tug-of-war where one person fights for closeness while the other fights for space. Real, healthy, lasting love happens when both people are willing to meet in the middle. When both people take responsibility for their fears, their wounds, and their patterns. So if you find yourself exhausted, drained, and constantly questioning your own worth in a relationship with an avoidant, let this be your wake-up call. You do not have to stay in a dynamic where you are constantly proving yourself. You do not have to shrink, suppress your needs, or settle for breadcrumbs of affection. You deserve love that is consistent, secure, and freely given, not love that feels like a battle to be won. And for the avoidants out there who may be listening, if you truly desire love, if you want deep, meaningful connections, then you must be willing to challenge the walls you've built. No one can do this work for you. No one can love you enough to make your fears disappear. That is an internal battle only you can fight. But the reward of doing so is immense, because on the other side of avoidance is a love that is no longer ruled by fear, but by trust, safety, and deep, unshakable connection. So whether you are the one who loves the avoidant or the one who struggles to let love in, know this: growth is a choice. Healing is a choice. And the quality of your relationships will always be a direct reflection of the choices you make. Choose love, choose courage, choose to break the cycle. Thank you for being here today, for listening, and for opening your heart to these words. If this message resonated with you, take it with you, reflect on it, share it, and most importantly, act on it. Because knowledge is powerful, but it is action that creates real change. Thank you.